Hey everyone, welcome back, and Merry Christmas! This is part 2 of our holiday special, continuing the story What Happens When You Write to Satan Instead of Santa. Huge thanks once again to you/lifeisstrangemetoo for creating this unforgettable blend of dark fantasy, horror, and twisted holiday humor. In this part, the story goes deeper, the tone gets darker, and the consequences can no longer be ignored. So get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let's get into some Christmas Reddit horror stories. Fire-breathing butterflies were whizzing around my head when I got the call from Josh's parents. We had tried to put them in a jar, but apparently old jam jars are no match for hellfire, and the butterflies had burned their way through. They had also managed to burn through 4 of my curtains, 1 couch cushion, and all of our ice cream, though I suspect that was actually Franken-Teddy. And yet they seemed completely immune to their own fire. I struggled to pay attention as Josh's mom, just as much of a bully as he was, shrieked at my on the other end. If you think for a second that you can get away with having some goon assault and threaten my child, I've got bad news for you. Well, you see, Josh was pulling the wings off of Sarah's butterflies and I don't give a shit about some stupid bugs. You know what, smart guy? I'm gonna have my husband come over there and kick your ass. Rita, I really don't think that's a good idea because the line clicked dead in the middle of my sentence. And sure enough, within a minute, Rita's husband was pounding on my door. Miss Hatchetface answered the door to reveal Rita's husband, Mike, a heavily tattooed man with way more biceps than brains, in a tight shirt that looked like someone had vomited rhinestones all over it. So, he began, in what I can only assume was his best tough guy voice. Where the fuck is this guy who threatened my kid? Oh, Franken-Teddy? Miss Hatchetface replied cheerily. I think he's upstairs trying on dresses with Sarah. Hey, Franken-Teddy, Miss Hatchetface called out. Mike looked a little bit unsure of himself as the 7-foot-tall teddy bear dressed in a unicorn cloak descended the stairs. I have answered the Lady Hatchetface's call, he boomed out in a voice so loud I could feel it in my gut. This man wanted to talk to you about what happened with Josh, Miss Hatchetface said. I did not regret that I did not send him to hell, but I believe that fate shall afford me another opportunity. That seemed to make Mike angry enough that he forgot his common sense for a moment, and he jammed a finger into Franken-Teddy's chest as he spoke. Nobody threatens my family, he said through clenched teeth. I'm gonna kick your fucking ass, bro. I am not in possession of an ass. I lack the human need to defecate. I mean, I'm going to fight you, bro. I am not designed for fighting. I am designed for loving. Would you like for me to love you instead? Mike's mouth hung open in stunned silence. Are you coming on to me? He asked, his voice much smaller this time. You know what? He cleared his throat. I don't need this. I'm just gonna call the cops. I'll see you in hell, buddy. If that is what you wish, Franken-Teddy replied, and before I knew what was happening, there was a black and purple swirl of flames around the two of them, and they had disappeared. I said weakly, did he just take him to hell? Oh, Miss Hatchetface replied. Franken-Teddy's always been a bit literal. I'll go fetch them. She stood there for a moment with a placid smile on her face. Are you going to fetch them? Oh, right now? Okay, sure, why not? With that, Miss Hatchetface disappeared in a puff of purple flames and smoke. My head began to feel warm on one side, and I wondered for a moment if I was having a stroke. Then I caught a glimpse of myself in a picture frame. My head was on fire. Before I had time to panic, I felt a cold blast and my vision went white, and I realized I was covered in foam. I turned around to see Sarah holding the mini fire extinguisher from under the kitchen sink and grinning. Thanks for, My sentence was cut off with foam as the fire extinguisher blasted me in the face again. Sorry, Dad. You are still on fire a bit. That's okay, honey, I replied. I heard the familiar sound of rushing air that was usually accompanied by black and purple flames and turned around to see that Miss Hatchetface had returned, along with Franken-Teddy and a much paler-looking Mike. The demons, Mike stuttered. I saw demons! Jesus, Franken-Teddy, I said. Where did you take him? I delivered my guest to the gates of Hell City's greatest hellscape, What now? I asked.
The hellscapes are like Hell's theme parks, Miss Hatchetface explained.
Oh, that doesn't sound so bad, I said.
Well, not for the demons, no, she said. But for the damned souls, it's more like a themed arena of torture.
Oh, I said.
I do not understand why the human did not enjoy his trip. There were snow cones.
But they were made of human blood, Miss Hatchetface said.
But they were O-positive, the most delicious kind of human blood.
Miss Hatchetface's tail twitched as she giggled. Well, I trailed off. Is there any way we could maybe make sure he doesn't remember what happened?
I believe I can be of assistance, Frank and Teddy replied.
And before I could stop him, he had used his enormous paw to bash Mike over the back of the head. Mike immediately fell over, either unconscious or dead.
I have seen this technique employed in the black squares you refer to as teddyvision.
You mean television? I asked.
What is a tele?
It's short for You know what? Never mind.
Very well.
So what should we do with him? I said, staring at Mike's unconscious form drooling onto my carpet.
Lady Hatchetface has informed me that humans do not eat other humans. I have no other suggestions, Frank and Teddy replied.
Just then, an ear-splitting scream filled the air, and I saw our neighbor Rita standing in the doorway, hands on either side of her face and pale as snow.
"What did you people do to my husband?"
she wailed, throwing herself on the ground and slapping Mike's face hysterically in what I can only assume was an attempt to wake him. She must not quite believe he was okay, because she slapped him a few more times just to make sure. When she was done making sure that he was still alive, she looked up at all of us. Her eyes were bulging out of the sockets as she pointed a shaking finger at me.
"You,"
she said, her face so red that she made the pink-skinned Miss Hatchetface look like an albino.
"I've already called the cops on you freaks. You're all going to jail for a very long time."
As if on cue, a police cruiser rolled to a slow stop in front of my house, and two officers made their way slowly towards my door.
"Which one of you is Rita?"
the tall, dark-haired officer asked.
"I am,"
Rita practically shouted as she jumped to her feet. "And these," she said with venom in her voice,
"these are the freaks who attacked my husband and son."
Miss Hatchetface grinned at the officers placidly, as her tail snaked its way up under her skirt until it was hidden from view.
"Are you the husband?"
the other officer asked, kneeling down on the ground next to Mike with a sympathetic expression on his face.
"Yes," Mike said.
"Officer," he whispered, "these people aren't human."
"They're not?"
the officer asked, a thin crease spreading across his brow.
"No," Mike said. "They took me to hell. I saw demons and monsters and—"
"Okay, well, I've heard enough." The first officer cut him off, turning towards Rita.
"Lady, you know it's a crime to prank call 911, right?"
"What?" Rita's mouth flopped open like some sort of fish.
"You're acting like I'm in the wrong here? These people, these freaks, attacked my family."
The dark-haired officer shook his head. "Where I'm from, we don't call people who look different from us freaks. You can either vacate the premises on your own, or you can vacate them in the back of my squad car." Rita's face took on a cartoonish expression of disbelief, but when she saw that the officer wasn't kidding, she grabbed Mike's arm and attempted to tug him to his feet. After an awkward moment of struggling, the two were stumbling away back to their house. The first officer turned to Frank and Teddy and said sympathetically, "My cousin has a growth hormone condition. You just let me know if those people cause you any more trouble." He set his business card on the table next to the front door and motioned for his partner to leave. "Oh, and I know it's none of your business," he said, turning to Miss Hatchetface, "but you should get some aloe vera for that sunburn. Not that you, don't look beautiful. I mean, you're very beautiful," and his partner loudly cleared his throat and patted the rambling officer on the back. Right," he said. "Time to go." "Of course," Miss Hatchetface giggled as she shut the door behind them. "Well, that went better than I expected," I said. "I mean, that really almost got out of hand." "Indeed. I was almost unable to purchase a souvenir for the Princess Sarah." "Wait, what?" I asked. "Hooray, a souvenir!" Sarah squealed. Frank and Teddy began rummaging around in his unicorn cloak, and I held my breath, dreading what he would pull out of it. I let out a long sigh of relief when he finally produced an ordinary-looking TV remote. "What does it do?" Sarah asked, tilting her head to the side. I don't think that's an appropriate gift for a child, Frank and Teddy," Miss Hatchetface said.
Nonsense, replied Frankenteddy. It is a child-friendly one. A child-friendly what? I asked. Miss Hatchetface plucked the remote out of Frankenteddy's paw and began laughing to herself. Oh, I see, she said. In hell, the demons watch the punishments on a sort of reality TV, she explained, turning towards me, and they can select the punishment they want to see with their TV remote controls. Wait, what? I said. But this one is for child demons, she continued on. Take a look. The remote was black plastic and looked like any other TV remote control you'd find at the store. Printed across the top in silver letters was the phrase, "The Remote of Minor Inconveniences." Instead of numbers and menu buttons, it was covered in buttons that said things like tickle, tinnitus, and unscratchable itch. At the center of the remote were two big purple plus and minus buttons that simply said intensity. I realized that Sarah was standing on her tiptoes behind me, too late to stop her from snatching it out of my hand and matching the tickle button as she pointed it at Frankenteddy, who immediately erupted into roars of laughter. Ha 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 ha. I find no humor in this situation, but I am unable to stop laughing. Ha 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 ha. I was about to take the remote away when Miss Hatchetface caught my eye and smiled, and I forgot what I was doing. Why don't we leave them to it, Mr. Rogers, she said. I had a, private matter I wanted to discuss with you. Private matter? I asked. Those glittering obsidian eyes were like bottomless pools of water, shimmering in the moonlight as they drew me in. Yes, she giggled, but let's just keep it between us two. Maybe we could go somewhere more discreet. Yes, discreet. Great idea. She smiled as she reached out and grabbed my hand and led me slowly across the room and up the stairs. She led me into the master bedroom and sat me down on the bed, closing and locking the door behind her before turning towards me. One corner of her mouth was raised into a smirk as she looked at me and said, "So about that private matter." I woke up the morning after my discussion with Miss Hatchetface feeling sore, both mentally and physically. It turns out that she had wanted to discuss some things that my body and mind were both woefully unprepared for, and for the sake of maintaining what shreds of my dignity remain, I'd rather not recount them here. I'll only say that the experience left me drained and satisfied, the way one might feel after running a marathon and being beaten with shoes after they crossed the finish line. Regardless, I hope it to be the first of many long, deep conversations to come. The next morning, Miss Hatchetface brought me a tray of what I'd call a demon's best attempt at breakfast in bed. She set the tray down on my lap as I fidgeted about in my torn and burned pajamas. I tried to suppress the look of deep discomfort that came reflexively to my face as I eyed my questionable breakfast. There was a large bowl filled with a mess of shiny black tentacles, still worming their way around in a green slime, a small dessert plate that seemed to consist of nothing but purple flames, and a wine glass of what I surmised by smell to be pure gasoline. Wow, this looks... wow, I said, feeling rather unconfident in my poker face. Well, I competed in Hell's Iron Chef contest, Miss Hatchetface said proudly. Really? I had no idea Hell had an Iron Chef contest, I replied. Oh yes, said Miss Hatchetface. Although I didn't win, the medical examiner who performed the autopsy determined that it could not be conclusively proven that it was my food that had poisoned the taster. Anyways, eat up. You'll need to gain some strength back after last night. I cleared my throat nervously. I'm not hungry, I lied. Are you sure? She asked. Because I had some grave and unexpected news for you, and I was hoping to at least get your blood sugar up before I told you. You what now? I asked, nervously scratching my thigh through one of the burn holes in my pajama pants. I wanted to talk about Sarah, she said. What about her? Don't you think it's a little odd that Satan answered her letter with a 7-foot-tall demon teddy bear? Well, gee, now that you mention it. What I mean to say is, Miss Hatchetface leaned in a bit closer to me, and I caught the scent of burning firewood with an undertone of something musky and sweet rising from her skin. Do you have any demon blood in your family? Actually, my grandfather was a demon, I said. Oh, really? No. I felt her tail, soft like lambskin, slapping gently against my calf muscle as she giggled. You're funny, Mr. Rogers, she said. But then her voice lowered to a conspiratorial tone as she leaned even closer. Do you think that Satan answers mail from every little girl that sends him letters? She asked, her voice full of earnestness. How many little girls send letters to Satan? Well, they have to send them to somebody, don't they? She said. I mean, Santa never answers them, that fat old drunk. Are you saying that Santa Claus is actually... Look, she cut me off. Most girls would be terrified to death of a thing like Frank and Teddy, but Sarah seems to have a natural affinity for him. She seems to have no problem controlling him whatsoever. Can you do that? Well, no, I said, but I thought that was because of how Satan designed him. Ha ha! Miss Hatchetface laughed heartily. This time I was sure her tail must have left a mark as it slapped into my shins. Satan doesn't design anything. He just sits behind that desk and tells other people to design things. Still though, somebody designed him. Well, yes, but he has the soul of a demon. No ordinary mortal would be able to tame him. Satan must have known that. Otherwise, he never would have sent such a dangerous present in the first place. I wasn't sure if I trusted Miss Hatchetface's assessment. After all, my few experiences with Satan's judgment had resulted in fire-breathing butterflies, a TV remote that gave you tinnitus, and a giant teddy bear who had sent my neighbor to hell. Then again, it had also resulted in Miss Hatchetface herself, and I really couldn't fault him for that. So, what does that mean? I asked her, dreading that the answer would be anything but, nothing at all. Your daughter is still your sweet little angel, and nothing at all has to change. But that wasn't the answer that Miss Hatchetface gave. Well, it just means that instead of learning the piano or saxophone after school, you should consider getting Sarah a tutor in satanic magic. Oh, is that all? I asked, suddenly growing very dizzy and taking a sip of the gasoline drink that Miss Hatchetface had brought me that morning. Oh, I said in surprise, this tastes like vanilla. Yes, it does, Miss Hatchetface said. Miss Hatchetface? Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Are my ears smoking? Yes, Mr. Rogers. Okay. It took about an hour for the smoke in my ears to thin out to a light gray steam, and by that time, Miss Hatchetface had managed to convince me that getting Sarah an after-school satanic magic tutor was the right thing for our family. We were standing in the living room, my stomach rumbling as I watched Sarah lightly torment Frank and Teddy with the remote of minor inconveniences. First, she gave him a pig's tail. Then she blew his ears up to the size of dinner plates. Finally, she summoned a little blue sparrow that sat on his head and lightly pecked him every few seconds. Frank and Teddy didn't seem to mind the ears. He didn't seem to even notice the sparrow, but the pig's tail seemed to be concerning him greatly. I do not understand the purpose of this small, twirly appendage, he boomed out, craning his neck around to have a better look at it. It's funny, Sarah squealed. I see. The purpose is humor. I am suitably amused. Ha, 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 ha. Sarah threw her head back against the couch cushions and kicked her feet up and down as she erupted into wild giggling. I cleared my throat in a non-effectual attempt to get their attention. I turned hopelessly to Miss Hatchetface, who stuck 2 fingers in her mouth and wolf whistled so loudly that 2 of the picture frames on the mantelpiece cracked. I said again, noting that my voice seemed suddenly quieter even though I was sure I was still speaking at the same volume. Sarah, Miss Hatchetface and I have had a discussion, and we decided that from now on you're going to be receiving lessons from a tutor in satanic magic after school. My hope that Sarah would balk at the prospect of receiving any kind of lessons after school was quashed by her enthusiastic hooray, and I resigned myself to the fact that I was going to be inviting yet another demon into a household which had already begun to feel crowded with them. So, I said, turning a little morosely back to Miss Hatchetface, now that that's settled, I guess we should write to Satan and have him send somebody up. Miss Hatchetface opened her mouth to answer, but she was interrupted by a rigid 3 knocks at the front door. She grinned sheepishly, saying, "That should be her now." Before I could ask just how in the hell, no pun intended, Satan had managed to already find out about that I had agreed, the door was swinging open and my heart was sinking all the way down to my stomach as I saw what was standing in my doorway. It had the stooped, slumping shoulders of an old woman draped in an ugly vomit-green sweater that had little yarn baubles hanging off the ends of the sleeves. A reptilian tail poked out of the bottom of a thick canvas skirt, slapping on my porch in the same steady rhythm someone who has been kept waiting might impatiently tap their foot.
But worst of all was the face. It was the face of an old woman, lined so many times over by unforgiving years that it looked like a crumpled piece of tissue paper with veins underneath. Its angry reptile yellow eyes were distorted behind the thick fishbowl lenses of its bifocals. But the face wasn't the worst because it was ugly. No, that I could handle. The face was the worst because it was the face of my 6th grade English teacher, Miss Robbins. "Hello, Darren," Miss Robbins croaked out in her trademark tone of perpetual disappointment. I gasped out. "What the hell are you doing here?" Miss Robbins clucked her tongue the way she did when she was about to tell you off. "I do not allow foul language in my classroom, Darren, no matter how old you are." "You're from hell," I said desperately. "How could that possibly offend you?"
Would it offend you if I used your home country as an expletive, Darren? As Miss Robbins looked over her bifocals at me, fixing me with that yellow reptilian gaze, I all of a sudden felt like I was in the 6th grade again, and I had done something very, very wrong, like going to the bathroom without a pass. I opened my mouth, closed it again, and turned to Miss Hatchetface. "I'm not having this spiteful old biddy teaching my kid," I said firmly. But before Miss Hatchetface could respond, I heard another smattering of giggles and turned to see Sarah standing on the end of Miss Robbins' tail as it clicked up and down, bouncing her up in the air a few inches each time. Miss Robbins was grinning down at her, the kindness of the smile managing to take some of the ugly out of her face. "Oh yes, dearie," she said. "It's quite fun, isn't it?" I suddenly remembered why I had hated Miss Robbins so much as a kid. It was because she had treated the boys like hooligans and the girls like princesses. And she wasn't such a bad English teacher in the end. I had grown up to be a writer after all. Sarah turned to me, errant strands of hair falling over her face and sticking to her mouth. She promptly puffed them away. "Can she stay, Daddy?" she asked, putting on the same look she did when she wanted an extra scoop of ice cream or an extra hour before bedtime. A look that she knew cut right through to my heart and turned me into a yes machine. "Can she?" I looked from Sarah's hopeful puppy dog eyes to Miss Hatchetface's encouraging grin to Frankenteddy's indifference as the sparrow continued to peck at his head. I sighed and simply said, "All right," to which Sarah responded by exploding into a chorus of cheers and seizing Frankenteddy's paws and jumping around in circles. "I am not aware of what is being discussed, so I will simply mirror your excitement," he boomed, and I noted with pleasure that Miss Robbins seemed to regard him with an obvious distaste. "Would you like to step inside and take a seat?" Miss Hatchetface smiled kindly at the Miss Robbins, but the old English/satanic magic teacher must have been immune to Miss Hatchetface's charm. She simply shot her a disgusted look and huffed her way into my house and up the stairs, that long reptilian tail flopping ridiculously on each step as she climbed. Later that night, I was ready to hop in the shower and wash the soot off a particularly vigorous discussion with Miss Hatchetface, when I'd realized that my towel was gone. I assumed that Miss Hatchetface had put it in the laundry, so I left the water running and made to leave when I saw her through the crack in the door. She was hunched over, holding something cupped between her hands and speaking to it. I can't explain why, but I closed the door again until just a tiny open space remained and pressed my ear up against it. I could only just hear what she was saying. "Yes, yes," she whispered to whatever was in her hands. "The old woman is here now, and she called me a tart, thank you very much." She paused as if listening to something that I could not hear. No, it's fine," she went on. "It's fine. He doesn't suspect a thing. Everything is going according to plan." She paused again, this time for longer, and I began to wonder if she might have heard me, but then I heard the familiar whoosh wear that often accompanied the black and purple flames that meant something was vanishing into hell, followed by her footsteps trailing off downstairs. I decided the towel could wait, and it might behoove me to go ahead and hop in the shower. When I got out, a clean, drier, warm towel was hanging on the outside doorknob of the bathroom. I toweled myself off, and I had just finished wrapping it around my waist when Miss Hatchetface came back in. "Oh, you're finished," she giggled. "I was beginning to worry you drowned in there." "Oh no, some of the soot was really caked on," I lied. She giggled again, but I saw something in her eyes that looked like suspicion. "Hey," I said, breaking the awkward silence that had fallen. "Did I hear you saying something to me while I was in the shower?" "Me?" Miss Hatchetface's eyes widened in surprise, though feigned or genuine I could not tell.
"I was quiet as a mouse," she said sweetly, "just reading one of your books." Sure enough, one of my books was cracked open on the nightstand, but the uneasy feeling didn't go away. And as I lay awake that night, Miss Hatchetface's little pink chest softly rising and falling next to me, I wondered exactly what it was that I didn't suspect. The next morning, I was a little bit tired and a lot hungry. Miss Hatchetface had insisted on bringing me breakfast in bed again when I stumbled downstairs to find that my living room had been demolished. Miss Robbins had set up a blackboard against the far wall and was drawing bizarre satanic symbols all over it with chalk, while Sarah sat at rapt attention in a desk that looked as if it had been stolen from her kindergarten. For just a moment, I couldn't help but think how adult Sarah looked, her bright blue eyes greedily scanning over the board as she drank in its knowledge. I felt a little pang of my little girl's growing up blues before I shook it off, telling myself it was far too early for all that. Next to Sarah's desk gaped a large black pit with burn marks around it. Every once in a while, Frank and Teddy would throw a Cheeto fruit into it, and a large purple tentacle would shoot up from the darkness and catch it midair before slithering back down into the darkness. The couch had been pushed up against the staircase. The cushions had somehow been transformed to red, patent leather, and two large rounded horns sprouted from either side. I sighed, giving the hole in the ground a wide berth as I went to the kitchen and grabbed a beer from the fridge before plopping down on my couch. I heard a, "Hey, watch where you stick that thing," from my couch and leapt back to my feet. "The couch decided it doesn't like being sat on all the time, Daddy," Sarah said, turning and smiling sweetly up at me. "Oh, okay," I replied, dreamily. "I suppose next a carpet will decide it doesn't want people to walk all over it." Sarah giggled. "Don't be ridiculous, Daddy." I took a big gulp of my beer. "The courage of the couch is to be commended," Frank and Teddy intoned in his monstrous baritone. "It has risen above its station in life and will soon dominate the humans that once saw fit to make it their seat slave." "What?" I began, but Miss Hatchetface cut me off. "Have some more Cheeto fruit, Teddy. You get cranky when your blood sugar is low." "No demon in hell has the authority to command me but Satan himself," Frank and Teddy boomed. "Have some Cheeto fruit, silly," Sarah said. "Okay." With that, he lifted up the wheelbarrow of the fruit that was next to him and tipped it down his throat. The sparrow on his head squawked in protest, and Miss Robbins eyed the display with snobbish displeasure. "Huh," she said. "I don't know why Satan thought that thing was an appropriate companion for a little girl. When I was her age, I kept an evil unicorn, Strider. Now he was a pet." "Are you sure it wasn't a dinosaur?" Miss Hatchetface asked, voice dripping with faux honey. Apparently, she hadn't taken it kindly when Miss Robbins had called her a strawberry tart the day before. "And just what is that supposed to mean?" Miss Robbins asked, swelling up indignantly like a great big bullfrog ready to burst. "I believe the Lady Hatchetface is implying that you are old," Frank and Teddy said, wiping the Cheeto dust on the couch, who let out a disgusted grumble. "Yet the Lady Hatchetface is approaching 17,000 years of age herself. Perhaps she is merely implying that you look extremely old." "Yes, well, we aren't all half succubus and because of the wrinkles." "Yes, I understand my appearance and the hunchback," Frank and Teddy finished. Miss Robbins' finger began to wag dangerously in Frank and Teddy's direction, and I decided that I had better cut in before there was any more trouble. "So," I said a little too loudly, "what exactly are you guys learning today?" "We are learning about the fundamentals of demonic possession," came Miss Robbins' sharp retort. "And afterwards, perhaps a lesson in etiquette for you, Darren. It is not polite to interrupt the teacher's lesson." "Right, and what about the giant squid hole in my living room?" "We opened a portal to the netherworld, Daddy," Sarah said with the casual ease of someone explaining what they'd had for breakfast that morning. "It's like hell's basement, where all the incomprehensible beings that existed in the black void of nothingness before the universe was birthed live." "Huh," I replied, taking another gulp of beer. Just then, a low, rumbling growl emitted from the hole, shaking the picture frames off the walls and sending cracks through the ceiling. "Could we maybe shut that?" "We haven't learned how to shut portals yet," Sarah replied. "Okay." I took another sip of beer, realized that it was just air because the beer was already gone, and wandered off into the kitchen to see if I could scrounge up something resembling human food. I opened the refrigerator and my hair blew black as a deep infernal roar erupted from within. I slammed the door shut. "Sarah?" I called out to the living room. "Yes, Daddy?" "Did you open a portal to the netherworld inside the refrigerator?" "Yes, Daddy." I sighed, closed my eyes tightly, and rubbed my temples. As I stared into the blackness of my own eyelids, an idea occurred to me. The night before, I had puzzled over the problem of Miss Hatchetface's mysterious conversation with no one until the early hours of the morning. I could not come to any sort of conclusion, my head fogged by lack of sleep and the gentle warmth that perpetually radiated from Miss Hatchetface's skin. Yet now I realized that whatever was going on, Satan was surely behind it. After all, he was the one who had sent Miss Robbins up, and he was the one in charge. And, perhaps most importantly, he was the one who had buzzed me down to hell every time I called his customer service department with a complaint. At first, that had irritated me. It was almost as bad as dealing with Comcast customer service here on Earth. But now it could be an opportunity for me to get down to hell and snoop around a bit. I slid my phone out of my pocket and hit the number for Hell's customer service hotline, which I had saved in my phone. It was picked up after one ring, and the familiar, pushy voice of the customer service representative answered. "Welcome to Hell's customer service. How may I help you today?" You know, that joke's getting pretty tired. Why don't you come up with something better then? Seems like a lot of effort.
The other end sighed and mumbled something about lazy writing. "Is this Mr. Rogers again?" she asked, her tone telling me that she already knew the answer. "Yes, I wanted to talk about a portal to the netherworld in my... Please hold." The line clicked, and I noted with some confusion that the hold music was Creed's "Can You Take Me Higher?" The line clicked again, and Satan's enthusiastic voice answered. "David, buddy," he almost yelled into the earpiece, "what's shaking?" "It's Darren," I said. "It's what's shaking is the gaping pit to the netherworld that Sarah opened up in the middle of my living room." "Oh, well that's no good. Is Gary down there?" "Who is Gary?" "Gary is the giant octopus whose ink is the source of the universe's dark matter." "Well, there is a giant octopus." "All right, well, I'll send someone to close that portal up right away. How does Tuesday work for you?" "Satan, it's Wednesday right now." "I meant the Tuesday after next." "Satan, there's a giant octopus living beneath my living room who could squirt dark matter all over my furniture at any moment. Could we maybe talk about this face to face?" Satan's voice trailed off. "I'm a little busy right now, Darren. Don't worry, I'll send somebody within a few months." "What happened to Tuesday?" "No, you know what? Buzz me down." "Okay," Satan said, "but I'm not at the office." "Where are—" But my voice was drowned out by the roar of the black and purple fire that swallowed me whole, sucking me down to hell like human-flavored soda through a straw. I stumbled across the rusted red dirt and cracked volcanic stone as I landed in hell, although just where in hell I was, I had no idea. It seemed to be some sort of construction site where giant purple-skinned behemoths hauled around girders made from the ancient yellowed bones of some even larger beast. I stood on a hill overlooking it all, and from my perspective, it seemed as if the demons were laying down a monumental pentagram, flat across an enormous expanse of blood-red sand. Torches stood at each of the 5 points, made from trees so tall and wide that they could have held up the earth itself. Inside each gap between the star and the circle were archaic-looking symbols. I could not explain why, but just looking at them filled me with a deep sense of dread. I looked up to see Satan standing beside me, eyes squinting tight as he surveyed the work, his 2 polished black horns poking through holes in a plastic yellow construction hat. "Hey, Derek," he said, smiling down at me. "What are you doing on the ground?" I scrambled up to my feet, made a poor job of brushing the dirt off of my trousers, and looked at Satan. I trailed off. Now that the first part of my plan had actually worked, I realized that I hadn't really given any thought to what the next part was. What are you guys building?" "Oh, this?" Satan grinned. "It's a park. It's a park in the shape of a pentagram." "Well, this is hell, Derek. A pentagram fits the aesthetic."
It's Darren, actually, I replied. What's Darren? Never mind. Okie dokie, Derek, Staden said. But as you can see, we're a little bit busy down here in hell, and I can't really afford to send anyone up right now to fix the portal in your living room. Why don't you just ask Miss Robbins to do it? Miss Robbins knows how to do it? I asked, momentarily forgetting I was on a fact-finding mission. Why didn't you just tell me that over the phone? Well, you seemed like you were in an awful hurry to get down here, Staden replied. I thought maybe you missed me. What? Is there anything else you need, Derek? He asked. As you can see, I'm a little bit busy here. You're only watching other people work. You're damn right, Staden replied enthusiastically. I'm the boss down here, and the boss's job is to watch other people work and silently project the idea that they should be working harder. Anyway, I'll see you soon, Derek. You will? But Staden didn't respond. Instead, the familiar black and purple flames kicked up around me, and I once again felt that sensation of being sucked up through a straw. I landed back in my kitchen, elbows and knees banging hard against the linoleum floor. I struggled back up to my feet and saw that the portal in the living room had been sealed. Gary the octopus was gone, though the burn marks on my carpet remained. Gary called while you were on your way up, Sarah explained. He told Miss Robbins to seal the hole up because you didn't like Gary. That wasn't a very nice thing to say, Daddy. But I didn't. Grrr. The rumble vibrated from somewhere deep below the earth. I think you hurt Gary's feelings, Daddy, Sarah said. You should probably apologize. My fingers once again found my temples and began massaging as I squeezed my eyes shut against the chaos of my living room. I had come no closer to finding out what Staden was up to, and I was beginning to wonder if there were any potential side effects from being repeatedly sent to hell and back. And I still hadn't eaten breakfast. My eyes had been shut for all of 10 seconds when I heard an earth-shatteringly loud bellow in my ears. You appear to be suffering from a headache. Perhaps I can assist you. Frank-N-Teddy was bent down, his face so close to mine that I could count the particles of Cheeto powder at the corners of his mouth. No thank you, Frank-N-Teddy. I'm just fine. Very well. I turned towards Miss Robbins.
Listen, Miss Robbins, I began. I don't want to come downstairs to find any more portals to the netherworld in my living room, nor do I want to come down to find a couch that talks and is suddenly useless to sit on. Miss Robbins swelled indignantly. My teaching methods? Your teaching methods are just fine if you're teaching in your own home, I cut her off. But as long as you are teaching here, not to mention staying in the guest bedroom, you're to follow the rules of my household, which, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this, include a no portals to the netherworld clause. Miss Robbins glowered at me like she was a frog and I was an agile fly who had danced out of the reach of her gaping maw. Luckily, she must have decided that she was too offended for words, because she simply stormed off upstairs, reptilian tail thwapping each step as she went up. You know, the couch said, cushions flapping up as if the three of them composed a giant mouth. You're useless to sit on too, but you don't hear me throwing it in your face. I believe that the Lady Robbins was wounded by your words, but I do not believe the wound to be fatal. I sighed and wondered if it was safe trying to get another beer from the fridge. Sarah hadn't mentioned anything about the portal in the kitchen being closed, but I knew I had something else to do first. Sarah, I began wearily, I'm sorry I interrupted your lesson. It's okay, Daddy, Sarah grinned, her bright blue eyes shining with a child's carelessness. I was ready for a break anyway. Can I go upstairs and play Tea Party with Frank-N-Teddy? Of course, honey. Yay, Sarah squealed, streaming upstairs in a little girl-sized blur, before pausing at the banister and shouting at Frank-N-Teddy. Come on, silly! Yes, Princess Sarah! I heard the stairs creak in protest as Frank-N-Teddy's immense frame rocketed up them. How is your head, Mr. Rogers? I heard Miss Hatchetface's kind voice at my elbow. It's okay. Are you sure? Maybe I can make you a snack and that would... No! I shouted out reflexively. Miss Hatchetface's eyes had widened in surprise. I just meant, my mind stalled as it searched for an excuse. I'll feel better once I get this mess cleaned up in the living room. Oh, okay, Miss Hatchetface said cheerily. I'll help.
We made our way over to the miniature mock classroom, Miss Hatchetface to the blackboard, and me to the desk. Miss Hatchetface lifted the blackboard over her head and began carrying it towards the garage, but I didn't touch the desk. I was looking at something I saw in Sarah's notebook. The page she had been taking notes on had been ripped out, but there was a familiar figure in the indentations on the next page. I took the pencil she had carelessly left on the desk and began to edge it lightly over the indentations in the paper. When I had finished, I was staring at something I'd definitely seen before that day. In fact, a large pentagram dominated the page, little archaic symbols dotted between each gap between the star and the outer circle. They were the exact same symbols I'd seen in the Colossus under construction in Hell. I don't know what Satan is planning, but I do know that whatever it is, Sarah is involved.
Huge thanks once again to you/lifeisstrangemetoo for this incredible story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more holiday horror. I hope you have a safe and unsettling Christmas, and I'll see you in the next one.